And good day, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me. And for those of you sitting still in the outliers, there's lots of seats available. And we'd love to have a very engaging dialogue, so please do join us. So I'm Nesan Govender. I lead our talent and organization practice for Southeast Asia for Accenture. And this is our 5th edition of the report for talent. And it's the third time that I've been involved in it. And I think each year we have some more interesting and more exciting findings that do come out. So today I'm going to share with you just a glimpse of what some of the findings are. And then we're going to have a very engaging panel discussion to really talk about some of the challenges. Okay. Great, thank you. Okay, so in brief summary, there were 6 key areas that we really wanted to highlight in this year's report. And the report will be published. It's actually available right now for you to download, and you can get as much of the details as possible. But I'm going to go through each of these 6, but more importantly, I'm going to offer you some advice and some of the things that you can take away as FinTechs in terms of how to deal with some of the talent challenges. So let me start at the outset by talking about what's happening broadly in terms of the size of the market. And we estimate that there's approximately 18,000 people that are currently working across FinTech in Singapore. Now, the growth expectations that we see across these 18,000, we're expecting to see growth in excess of 30%. So certainly there's going to be an increase in the amount of FinTech resources that are required for Singapore. But the interesting thing is that there's a decline of about 20% from last year. So last year's expectations, we are expecting it to grow in excess of 50%, but this year we're seeing a slow decline. So whilst there still is growth, the growth is actually declining. The key thing I want to highlight in terms of what makes up our FinTech talent. So we see 4 different interesting profiles for FinTechs in Singapore. So the first is around our technology workforce, and that's typical what we'd see out of a FinTech. You know, majority of the workforce would be around what we call our tech wizards. But in addition to that, we see role profiles of corporate champions, role profiles of operations champions, and role profiles of those who are driving the commercialization of our FinTechs. And those definitely seem to be increasing. One of the interesting stats that we find with regard to how our FinTechs actually, the operating models. Now, 41% of the workforce of FinTechs are actually based in Singapore. And 59% of the workforce, FinTechs are leveraging an offshore or a nearshore delivery center. And that was one of the interesting findings in terms of the way in which that shift is focusing. So not all your workforce needs to be in Singapore. And we're finding that FinTechs are using more and more an offshore or a nearshore location for their delivery. The next key aspect is in terms of what shape does a FinTech actually take? And when we analyze the workforce, we start to see a diamond shape evolve. In a typical tech organization, in a large corporate, you'd find probably much more folk sitting at the lower levels or entry-level positions. But what we're finding in FinTechs, it's more of a diamond shape. So we're finding folk that are much more experienced. So greater than 10 years of experience makes up quite a huge percentage. And when we look at those at 5 years plus, it starts to make up a significant majority. So with this diamond shape, it starts to lead to a number of different challenges. And one of the challenges is what we call that frozen middle. That frozen middle in terms of a value proposition that's not just attractive for young graduates to join, but a value proposition that's attractive enough for more senior folk and the ability to be able to retain those folk and keep them going in the organization. We find that the roles that are still in high demand, product managers, product developers, software engineers, and we're also finding much more niche roles, AI engineers, cybersecurity specialists, blockchain engineers. Those seem to be the roles that are on the increase again. So the traditional roles that we would have seen in fintech organizations still remain, but we're starting to see a lot more focus on AI as a core competency and AI roles that are in high demand. The next key focus in terms of the study was around the value proposition. So one of the key findings was we asked the question about why do people join fintechs? And the majority of respondents said, we join fintechs because of the career progression, the ability to learn and grow, the ability to be able to work with good, interesting, innovative leaders. And then we also asked the correlating question, why do people leave organizations? And surprisingly, similar to previous year's results, people leave for exactly the same reasons. Lack of career progression, lack of learning and development, and the way in which the whole value proposition evolves does not meet expectations. But interesting enough, when we also asked, why do people leave? And many of the respondents, actually 64% of the respondents, said that when they leave, they prefer to go back to what we would call incumbents. So large corporates, large financial institutions, large tech firms. So people are leaving fintechs, not to go to other fintechs, but they're leaving again to go back to where they may have originally came from. The other interesting thing is that 74% of folk who leave expected a higher pay. So the promise of great rewards, the promise of that value proposition that's going to include lots of stock options, etc., not necessarily realizing. And people are leaving also because of the financial proposition. Now, when we talk about how fintechs actually organize their HR functions, and we coined the term moving away from being a pure HR function to one that has a focus on people experience. Now, interesting enough, 1/3 of our fintech organizations do not have an HR function. But then we also did further analysis in terms of those that do have an HR function. And there's a strong correlation between high business performance of fintechs and the maturity of practices of HR. So maturity of practices of onboarding, career management, succession planning, those seem to be focused on those high-performing HR functions. So whilst the majority of folk actually do want to have strategic HR functions that truly add value, not all of them are in the place right now to be able to build those industrialized functions within the HR function. And HR is often seen as a nice-to-have function for a fintech. And many of those folk that do not have HR folks, so HR functions, so that's the 1/3, actually it's line managers who are actually executing the day-to-day HR execution activities. We also focused this year's survey a little bit on culture to understand what are the cultural dimensions of why people join fintechs. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly actually, the reasons why people join is because of good leadership, a strong sense of psychological safety, so the ability to be able to innovate and do interesting things. And that's why people join. But there's one interesting aspect that featured quite low on the value proposition from a cultural perspective, and that was about customer focus. And the one reason why I'm actually particularly pointing around the customer focus one is that we typically expect fintechs to be a very strong focus on customer vision, strong focus also on continuous improvement. And these seem to be the lowest dimensions from a cultural perspective. So the key focus is, how do you make sure that from a cultural perspective, you still maintain that element that everything that a fintech is focused on is to meet a particular customer need? And that's the one element that we do want to focus on in terms of how do we drive some of the future in terms of the ways of working within FinTechs. So given these are some of the highlights, and our detailed report contains a number of key highlights in terms of overall talent, especially why people join, some of the channels that are best used to be able to attract talent within FinTechs, the declining skills and the skills on the uprise. But the key question remains, so what? So what should FinTechs do? In this year's report, we offer something slightly different. In the appendix, you will find a checklist in terms of an overall talent strategy, which we believe will be a true way in which you can actually go line by line and evaluate your talent strategy for your FinTech. And it offers you a good template in order to build your workforce of the future. So some of the key things that we want you to think about. Number one, the average half-life of skills is reduced to almost 1.5 years. So that means every 1.5 years, your skill sets need to evolve. So what does this mean from your talent strategy? We want you to re-look at your overall workforce. Think about those skills that you require, not just for 1 year or 2 years, but start thinking ahead in terms of 3 years and 5 years out. And start to think about how you can actually build that workforce. The second is which we all talk about the war for talent, and I'm actually frankly tired about talking for the war of talent, because it's all about talent abundance. And the previous panel was very interesting in terms of figuring out from a women perspective, in terms of perspectives, in terms of how you can find and build skills of women in the workforce. And the idea is that there's talent abundance. And talent abundance sits in that middle layer of the organization I talked about, and it sits in every part of your organization. And how do you figure out those relevant skills proximities? And we offer you a recommendation in terms of moving away from just thinking about jobs and job descriptions and role profiles, but really thinking about skills. We always think about skills as being the new currency. Think about the skills that you need to build and become a skills-driven FinTech. In that way, we will truly find that there's a way in which we can find talent abundance. And last but not least, in terms of the recommendations from a culture perspective, it's not just about the leadership in the organization. It's not just about the ability to innovate and the ability to do interesting things. But how do you make sure that you create that culture of continuous improvement which will drive out high performance? And how do you make sure that the customer vision remains at the center of the FinTech culture so that people can find a purpose that they can truly aspire to, and the way in which you can actually work together? With that, I'm going to hand back over.
Thank you very much, Nesan, for sharing with us the findings of the FinTech Talent Report 2023. And now we're going to move on to a panel discussion on this to talk about the opportunities and, of course, the challenges in navigating the FinTech talent landscape. Now, to moderate this session, please welcome on stage Ruben Lim, Chief Operating Officer of Singapore FinTech Association. Good morning, Ruben. And joining him on stage, we've got Tarinni, Director of Talent and Organization at Accenture. We have Samuel Rhee, Co-founder and Chairman of Endowus. Alvinder Singh, Deputy Director of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, as well as Adam Reynolds, Asia Pacific Chief Executive Officer of Saxo. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Over to you, Ruben.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I was actually hoping for louder applause. Can you guys do us a favor and give me the loudest applause if you can? Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yes, that's what I'm looking for. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ruben from Singapore FinTech Association. What I want to share with you today is that presenting before you, you couldn't get anything better than this. And don't let other halls and other stages hear this. But ladies and gentlemen, I have presented before you a financial institution, a regulator, a scale-up FinTech, and a consultant. So with this in mind, you're going to get a lot of insights. A couple of things I just want to call out for a start. We do have 2 roving mics around. I want to make the session as interactive as possible. And also at the same time, I will also want to implore my fellow panelists, do not hold back. I would like you to give your honest opinion. I know it's a big hall here, but Chatham House through, I don't know how is that going to be happening, but so that we can get the best out of it. Okay, so let's dive right into this. So I have an easy job because my job is to ask questions. They are the one who's answered the tough questions. Maybe I'll start from Adam. Maybe what I'll do is I would like you to invite you to probably introduce yourself, a quick one line. What do you do? And also maybe just to share a bit about your leadership style or the philosophy of leadership that you'll be holding on to.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, and great to be here today. So my name's Adam Reynolds. I'm CEO of Saxo Group for Asia Pacific. And I lead a team across the region of a couple of hundred people located in 5 different offices. For me, the most important thing that I can do in leadership is make sure that we have a culture that helps people to develop where they're going to be developing. I listen very much to the report. I really like this idea of helping people to improve themselves, to learn more. And I think if you can have that culture within your organisation, that is going to help you retain talent as well. So for me, that's the culture that I like to have within the Saxo Group.
Thanks, Adam. Alvin, please.
Hi, Alvin. I lead the FinTech Ecosystem Office at MAS. I've never thought much about my leadership style, but I think...
I heard a lot about it, though.
I'm sure you have. But if you ask me, I would just say, always just make sure your team, they know that you are standing, you're standing firmly behind them in most of their actions.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sam. I'm the co-founder and chairman of Endowus, which is a leading digital wealth platform and the first to help individuals invest their CPF. Leadership, okay, it's a tough one. For me, I think it's really important to be authentic and lead by example and create an environment and a culture where individuals can feel safe to take risk, especially in a startup environment, and also really encourage them to flourish in their roles.
Hi, I'm Tarinni, Khattar. I'm a director at Accenture in Southeast Asia. I lead the financial services for talent and organization. For me, I think my leadership style is all about continuous learning and growth. I believe in it personally, and that's how I motivate my teams as well.
Right, thank you everyone. So I just want to re-emphasize again, we do have roving mics. If you have any questions, please put your hand up and we'll make sure the mic comes to you. Now, we'll get the juice a bit more, but for a start, from the report, I just want to open up to all my speakers here. Any of the key findings that appeal to you that you'd like to call out and maybe elaborate more with our audience here? Anyone? Adam?
So for me, the thing that really grabbed me was, I think, the second point about the frozen middle. I think that's a real challenge in an organisation, especially an organisation like ours, where we have quite a lot of people who have been there for quite some time. Getting stuck in that frozen middle is a challenge for us, and helping people to have prospects within the organisation, within that frozen middle, so they don't feel that they're becalmed, is a challenge that we're always looking at.
Maybe I will echo that point, but I come from a different perspective, and I look at it from a bigger lens. And maybe I will say this from a story point of view. And this was when I was traveling and I was in the SQ lounge quite a few months ago. This founder, I met him at the lounge, was telling me that, okay, he's growing at this amount and all. This was a fintech. But in order to take his company and elevate it to the next level, he may have to get rid of about 80% of his staff and keep 20%. And because the 80% are very good at keeping the company at this level, but not sufficiently strong in taking the fintech to the next bound, which is what he wants so that he can list it eventually. And that is actually the issue. It's a frozen middle, but it is also a frozen middle that may not be able to be taught and have to be dismissed eventually. And as someone who works in the public sector, I was worried at what he said. But the point remains that the trade-offs become very apparent. You want to grow or you want to keep your head count, and sometimes you have to make difficult decisions.
Yeah, I think there's a struggle, especially as a startup. As a company evolves, how do you take your people with you? How do you upskill them, which is a very common feature of the report about learning, upskilling. And you have to hire well. So I think that's the first thing that you can do as a leader, as a manager, as a founder, is to hire the right people for the right reasons in the right places. The other thing is that, I guess we have an advantage because we have a lot more flexibility. So we've had multiple occasions where people have joined for that one role, but have transitioned into other roles because there's always a need for talent in new spaces. And sometimes they have to leave the company and upskill, and we're happy to welcome them back. And sometimes they can make that transition very quickly. But what I would really focus on is focusing on that individual. As I said, as a leader is important, and a manager. I mean, I can't manage all of the 150 people in the company. So it really is bringing strong managers, really training them up in their skill sets, because a lot of the people, especially in FinTech, especially in the startup scene, are first-time managers. So we really have to guide them and help them to really understand what are the different skill sets from an individual contributor moving to a manager of people and of a team. So I think that transition has to be managed really well. And then over time, I think that one of the most important things is really looking at the holes within the organization, because one of the things that, the takeaway from the report, one of the things that there are gaping holes in Singapore, especially in certain spaces. For example, for us, it's always a struggle looking for product managers, people in the design space, user experience in UI. That's a really gaping hole. I don't know why, but there is. There isn't enough of them around. So really trying to nurture talent from within, and then working collaboratively with organizations and schools to bring the next generation of talent, I think is a really important thing that we can do to prepare for the future.
Tarinni?
So just to round up, I think one of the key things that we saw this year in our report, which is pretty different from previous years, is the role of your leaders and culture in driving the organization. And actually, the reasons why people join is based on the quality of leadership, the way that the culture is driven, etc. So creating psychological safety, building trust, continuously growing as a learning organization are key things which I think are as critical as really having the right skills to drive business growth.
Thanks. Now we are done with the motherhood general question. Now let's go a bit deeper and going to ask individually a bit tougher questions. Samuel, is there a balance between profitability and hiring the right people? How do you achieve both in a scale-up scenario?
First of all, let's set the context. It's a very different environment now from what it was 2 years ago, right? So the macro environment is something that nobody has control of, whether you're a large financial institution or a small startup like us. It's something that we cannot control. What we can control is the things like cost. And so there is a tremendous amount of pressure, especially in the startup scene, especially in FinTech, especially where you are funded by venture capital money or private capital. There is a significant amount of pressure to manage your cost to reach profitability. So that's the reality of the world that we're in. And that may change in the future, but it's not going to change in the next 12, 18 months. So we have to come to terms with that and try to figure out what is the best thing to do within that constraint that you're in. And so for us, it was really important for us to do things that allowed us to retain the most important talent. So we did a small layoff last year, but what we did was also the management took a voluntary pay cut of 30%. So every leader took a pay cut so that every business unit was able to keep more people in the places so that we can continue to execute, continue to grow. And we had conversations with people where we had to part ways with certain people. So those are small things that you can do to alleviate the pressure, but the pressure is not going to go away. So startups and FinTechs will continue to have to prioritize. They'll have to really manage their talent pool. So building your talent pool too quickly and growing from like 100 to 500 people and then letting go of 300 or 80%, I'm shocked at that. But that's the wrong way to go about it, right? It also, when you lay people off, it affects culture, it affects sentiment, it affects your people in meaningful, deep ways. So you have to be very, very careful. And as leaders, it's on you to make that decision in the right way and to take care of your people.
Thanks, Sam. I think Sam raised a very important point about for the leadership team to take a 30% cut. I just want to take this chance to echo something I learned from a VC yesterday. So yesterday we had a few panel sessions, and one of the VC actually shared this with us publicly, that if any of the companies that they're talking to, and the founder or the founding team gave themselves a significantly or reasonably high wages as compared to the rest of the team, that's actually a very big red flag. Because as a leader, there's a lot of the need to take initiative. And I know it sounds like, oh, why are you telling us that? But there are actually startups out there that are not going by that principle. So I just want to pull that out. Tarinni, this is a rather high-level question, but I was hoping if you could just help us zoom it down a bit deeper as well. In the report, we talk about the difference between experience and attitude. So one of the things that we discussed in the report as well is that, if you look at a JD, many times, the first line is always 15 years relevant experience, 10 years relevant experience. And imagine if you're just 9 years and you're 1 year short, and off you go, you don't qualify anymore. So in that context, how should an employer determine and prioritize between experience and attitude? And how is it that from the point of submitting a resume, you can actually identify attitude? And after Tarinni, I think it's a question that I also like to open up to the rest to chime in as well.
Thank you. So I think there are three things I would consider when looking at a CV and profiling. One is, of course, the experience that the individual brings. But for me, that's baseline, probably 30% of what organizations should be looking at. The second is attitude, behaviors, mindsets, and a lot of that actually will not come out on the CV, but once you meet the individual. So that needs to be looked at when you're doing, the interviews and assessing the individual for fitment in the organization. I think the third thing, which has also come out in our report, which is largely underemphasized, is the potential for the future. So what is the potential that the individual brings to be able to lead in the future? And also, how can they reinvent in terms of their skill sets and what they bring to the organization? As Nesan was sharing earlier, the shelf life of a skill, used to be 7, 8 years. Now is, in the 1 to 2 year range. So once you join an organization, you really just have to keep reinventing. So kind of looking purely at experience in your CV, you're going to lose a lot of the talent pool.
Thanks. Adam, I know you're smiling, I do want to pick on you for that question because you came from a large organization. How do you really determine this then between attitude and experience?
So for me, attitude is way more important than experience. Mindset is the number one thing that we look for. Because we're not a large organisation, we're only 2,500 people, we're nothing like a JP Morgan. And when we take people in from the major banks, that's usually, they don't fit particularly well with us. We're much more interested in people who have a growth mindset, who have some skills that we can develop and that we can teach about the way we want to develop the organisation, rather than saying, you've been in financial markets for 15 years, we want to hire you because of your connections. I mean, that to us is not really important at all. So mindset number one, development potential definitely is linked, I think, also to mindset. The people with the right mindset, the open mindset, also wanted to develop them. So finding questions about what motivates someone is more important to me than where they've worked. And of course, you can look at a CV quite often if someone's been hopping around from place to place. That's usually, to me, more of a red flag than actually where they've worked, just to see whether they have that stability and ability to power on through when things are not great, or whether they jump off at the first opportunity.
Anyone like to chime in?
I'll just add, I mean, it's an interesting perspective. See, I don't come from an organization where I need to grow per se. All right, the central bank doesn't need to grow for the sake of growing and all that things. And second, it's you carry with you a degree of ethos of serving, public service and all when you join the government. And it's hard to suss that out from a CV alone, which is also why I'm very careful. I usually take the individual out for coffee and all that things to understand. Now, there are at least 2 individuals in the audience who I have hired, so they will know I have to take them out for coffee and all these things. But there's actually a more fundamental point that I think sometimes we miss, which is the individual must be able to click with the team that you have, but the individual must also be able to click with your personality. And I will acknowledge this when I hire from personal experience. I sometimes carry a larger-than-life personality. Now, you have to have that to pull this festival off. Sometimes you will make a very autocratic and difficult decision, and people will just have to execute it. I know this. I have made a lot of those decisions in the last 2 weeks. And so that larger than life personality, you must be able to suss that individual and say, hey, he can actually accept that and work within that constraints and all that thing. So I would say, which is why the experience point to me is less important, but the personality and all that things that he brings that I can only suss out from intimate coffee sessions that are way more important.
So interesting you mentioned coffee, because in Singapore context, for our foreign friends here, when the government invites you for coffee, it usually have a negative connotation. No, I'm joking. But on the other hand, to Alvin's point, I just want to call out that much as what he has shared earlier, he is known to be a very fair boss. So this is something that I think I heard from his team many, many times. And they can't tell you that, but I can, okay? So I heard it from them. But I just want to come in, so do you have anything else to add on that point? No. All right, okay, so I think, and one more question I want to have is actually bring it to Alvin. Guys, this is on talent, but I got regulator here. So really, why would a regulator or from a FTI, FinTech Innovation Group here, why would you be concerned about talent in terms of sustainability, supply, and how is this conversation important to you, and how do you see from a Singapore ecosystem perspective?
Okay, I think that's a direct answer to this, which is that if you need oil for a car, you need people for organizations and all these things. That is a statement of fact. And the point is, when you are in public service and you are engaging with stakeholders all the time, literally all the time, you hear this all the time. It becomes a howler that comes to you where, hey, I am short of people. It's either you allow it from a foreign source or you do something about your education system or whatever else. And mind you, our education system is brilliant. Foreign sources provide a good amount of talent. But the point remains that constraint is left, right, center. And more importantly, that constraint is made worse by the fact that every year, if you look at the theme of the festival, it involves cutting-edge technology. Last year, we spoke extensively about Web3. This year, you have heard the president in the morning speak extensively about artificial intelligence across all domains. Now, and of course, the president also highlighted that the software developers and all that things, that job could be replaced, which is good for Singapore in the short to medium term. But you still need deep expertise in cutting-edge technology. I was on a panel yesterday, a closed-door roundtable, where one of the panelists highlighted that as much as we are focusing today on the current trends and all that things, what are we missing out that is going to shape the future? Because we missed out generative AI. Let's be honest. Most of us in this room, speaking this time last year, would have missed, I think this time last year, would have missed that concept fully. We would have not focused on it. Maybe a few would have read academic literatures on it. And this point is important because what we are missing is the talent pool complements what we are missing. And these universities and all must train the next generation for these. And academics can play their part, but policymakers must play an amplified role in identifying this and then identifying the curriculum that will give these individuals the starting point in this institution, in these firms and all that things. And then it's up to them to accelerate their careers. That is why we think of it from that angle. It is so that curriculums can be shaped, academics can be trained, so that the future generation is at least sufficiently equipped. I'm not even suggesting well equipped here.
Again, to our foreign fintechs who are not familiar with Singapore or Southeast Asia, that statement that Alvin had just shared earlier is critical. It's critical because it embodies how we are as a system. That Singapore, some people will complain and say, Singapore everything is so curated, nothing is real. But really, it is because we are such a well-oiled mechanism that from the regulator to the institution, to the fintech, to the businesses, we are so well glued together that even something like talent is something that really passes through everything. And in fact, a lot of knowledge and a lot of insights are being shared as well. Now, the next question I have is actually for both Adam and Sam, because from a perspective of a large FI as well as a scale up. And if you are HR practitioners, this is a question for you as well. Should HR or human capital, human resource, have a seat in the boardroom, a driver's lever in setting the business direction and also on the strategy piece? And the reason why I'm asking that is because many times, and over time, you will hear that there are conversations changing from human resource now to human capital. The chief HR officer are now the chief people officer, chief culture, chief talent officer. A lot of these things have changed. And you are also seeing HR taking more a proactive approach. But yet, let's confess, many times the business owners, the product owners are the one driving it. Hey guys, I need this headcount. Hey guys, I need a headcount. Hey, I'm too expensive now. So they are the one taking that. So I want to put it on the spot. Really, should HR have a seat on the board and they take the direction?
I think absolutely they should. So within Saxo, we don't have HR, we have people and culture. We've also changed the name in the last couple of years. Our global head of people and culture, she sits on the executive team that reports directly to the CEO. And it's super important that they are there to help us understand how to develop the culture within the organisation to make us a high-performing organisation. It's not just about hiring people. It's not just about interacting with headhunters. You know, that's manual work. That really doesn't set the tone of the organisation. But, you know, as commercial evangelists or as tech wizards, we're not good with this culture stuff. We're not trained in it. We don't think about it. We think about our skill set. Our skill set may be selling something, maybe talking about our product, maybe engaging with external people, or we're a tech wizard and we just know how to code something and we're really, really good at that. That is a totally different skill set. So I think having someone overlooking how we develop our culture and making sure that we are going along a path which empowers people, which ensures that decisions are made at the lowest level possible, that makes sure your organisation remains agile, and that makes sure that we have development pathways for people and they don't get stuck in this frozen middle. That's really a huge part of what the People and Culture organisation needs to do.
I can tell you read the report. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to this concept of authenticity because I don't think it's necessarily needed that you need the chief people officer or HR officer on the board, especially at a startup, because normally the startup is a very small board, if they even have a board, right? And so it's not about that token gesture of having a chief people officer on the board or the executive committee, and normally a female chief people officer. And that's not what it's about. It's about what are you actually doing in the organization where the people and talent team are getting involved in the day-to-day, in the sourcing of talent, the taking care of talent, and growing that talent, and really doing the things that you're supposed to do to manage that talent. But it's an impossible task because these days the people team have to do everything. Like literally they are sourcing talent, like acquisitions and recruitment all the way through the interview process, and then they have to do the human resource management day to day. They are expected to be culture people, building culture in the organization. They have to do everything, and really that's the role oftentimes in an early startup of the founder. And so the people officer's role, and in our organization we actually had various different people, but right now we, for the first time, have a chief people officer because we're at a scale where that is important. We need a dedicated person who's going to actually lead that effort that is aligned to the philosophy and the values of the company. And oftentimes that person's role has to be complementary to the founders. So some founders are great leaders who are very great person and build the culture themselves, and the founders do build the culture, not just HR or people. And so the founder and the people officer has to be very complementary, work very closely in partnership, and have the right, share the common vision and the values that will get the organization where you want to take it.
So my takeaway from this is that, ladies and gentlemen, let's be fit for purpose. So just because we hear, so many times there are so many advice that people can be giving to you, but ultimately it all boils down to fit for purpose. So you can hear from a big FI and as well as from a scale-up that there are different needs. But I think one thing that Adam highlighted that I really appreciate is that the Chief People Officer and Culture Officer reports to the CEO directly, which is not, it may not be the norm because in some larger organizations, they actually report to the Chief Corporate Officer. So then it adds on another barrier. But in this case, for your organization, you don't have that. Now, we do have time, so I just want to open up the floor as well. If anyone has any questions, the tougher it is, the better for these panelists. So if anyone out there, you have, and then this extends to those who are standing at the back as well. Thank you very much for standing all the way through this. If you have any question, please do raise your hand, wave at me so that we can make sure the mic comes to you. Yes, we do have a question over there. Can someone help me with a mic, please? Yes, my brave soul. So if you could just invite you to introduce yourself as well before your question. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jia Hong. Good to see everyone here today. So my question is more to do with the developments in FinTech, because I've heard a lot about like developments in digital payments, digital finance techs. So I'm just wondering, like, which is the trend that you see as currently the most important part right now? Because I know there's a lot to talk about GenAI, but let's not forget that over the last year, we've also faced things like cryptocurrencies, digital payments, digital banking licenses, so on and so forth. So I just want your opinion to see which is the most important trend for you right now amidst all the noise.
Open to all panelists. Anyone?
I'll go first. I don't discount traditional technology. Don't get too caught up in the hype cycle and suggest that there's only generative AI and digital assets in the world, and those are the coolest jobs. Now, many of our payments systems actually work on traditional rails, and many of these companies require a fair bit of engineers, a fair bit of product developers, a fair bit of even the softer skills, the marketing people and all these things to actually fulfill their responsibilities. So don't discount that payment stack and all that things, the traditional one. At the same time, learn, upgrade yourself, learn that AI and digital assets and the notion of them powering the future of financial services is not going to go away. It is not a hype. If it was a hype, we won't talk about it continuously. You will realize that those conversations die quite quickly. And then I'll bring in the third dimension, which is always the most overlooked one, which is all the other FinTechs that actually do a tremendous job but are sometimes underrepresented or undervoiced. The wealth tech firms. They do a fascinating job in making wealth tech products more accessible to the man on the street. All right, your Endowus, your SIFI, and so on and so forth. I was just on panels with almost all of them in the last 2 days. Now, next, your insurtech firms. Now, all these are actually, if you distill it, they're using very traditional technology. They need their Java developers, they need their Python programmers, and so on and so forth. So I will put it to you, and I see you as a very young individual, suspect a student or fresh out of school, or maybe entering school. The world is your oyster when it comes to FinTech. Just don't try and think that your profession must always be in the cutting edge technology or in the Gen AI or the digital asset space. Because remember, whatever is cutting edge today, in 2 or 3 years' time becomes mainstream. So just bear that in mind.
Anyone else? And just for a plug-in, I happen to be a client of Endowus as well. Yeah, so just saying.
Thank you.
So I was going to just follow on with that. I think one of the big trends that I think has happened sort of post-COVID and really with the explosion of different technologies out there is the need to be very specialised, and organisations that want to be quite generalised and be a bit of everything for everybody really become an expert at nothing. And I think that has driven a need for more partnerships and a need to be willing to work with partners who are experts, which is, I think, where the whole FinTech ecosystem and this whole event becomes important, because you have small firms who are very specialised in one thing that they're good at, that can become partners with big organisations and provide something which the organisation itself can't really do. They don't have the resources, they don't prioritise it because they've just got so much complexity with regulation and other things. So for me, I think that is an important trend that will continue.
Any other questions? Oh, I do have one on the left. Oh, you have a mic. There you go.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Nikita calling from Securities Commission Malaysia. So I just wanted to ask, because we are not actually a startup, right? So we have some legacy issue when it comes to change management when we are working towards digital transformation. So I just wanted to know, first is how do you, as leaders of the organization, initiate change management, and how do you keep it sustainable? Because I think we do have a lot of older leaders or even people who've been there for a long time who cannot work or move along with the dynamic changes. So yeah.
This kind of tough questions, I have to look away very quickly at my panelists because there's no way I can answer that. Adam, I have to point at you. So why don't you take a step at it?
I'm getting all the questions. Change management is incredibly important. Change management is incredibly difficult and takes a lot longer than we think it should take, right? Because to actually embed new ways of working within an organisation is a real challenge. We've just gone through a major exercise of changing from being a siloed functional organisation to being a cross-functional journey organisation to make ourselves more agile. So we've introduced 10 cross-functional journeys with people across all the different parts. It has been a major, major exercise that we've completed in a very, very quick time. But the change management takes a lot longer than just changing the organisation, changing the way we work, changing the language we have, instilling that in the organisation, getting people to buy into it is a slower process than we think. And that's why when we talk about people and culture being part of the executive team in our case, being part of the decision-making process, they have to be there because, well, certainly with Saxo, they own that change management, they own that language, and they need to have the skill set to do that properly.
Maybe I'll speak to my fellow public servant there. All right. A very difficult, and I say this on a personal basis. The reason why is I'm not in the business of change management in my organization. I work in the innovation function where we are looking at the next bound and all that thing. So we're influencing the private sector more than the organization per se. So I can speak from it from a user of change management, and MAS has gone through a fair bit. Now, change management is not only difficult, but people hate it when things change, especially when you're in an organization for some time and you're used to doing a certain inefficient thing in a very efficient way. So you think about it, a very inefficient system you have, but because you're so used to using it, you are very efficient in using an inefficient system. My leave management system was like that in my organization, and I don't know whether I'm offending people when I say this. And
Chatham House rule.
Yeah.
Nothing goes out of this big space here.
So my leave management system was extremely inefficient, but I got so used to using it, such that when they moved to a very efficient system that is app-based, I still dislike it, but I still want to take leave. And also now I use it. The second thing is our document management system. Now MAS went through a significant shift in the way we manage our resources, our physical resources and all, for the better. And I will tell you that all my new staff that come in will say, wow, your document management system in the organization is amazing. And I tell you a secret, I still dislike it. And all these things. Why? Because I was so used to the old one. And the old one, just to let you know, was a Lotus Note-based. I don't know if you guys are old enough, but it was a Lotus Note-based system. Highly inefficient, super cumbersome, lousy search function. But I became very efficient at it. So my advice to you is that it's not only painful and all from an operationalizing point of view. People that dislike it will continue to dislike it, but will have no choice to use it. So soldier on. If you're in the business of it, just soldier on. Yeah.
Sam, we do want to hear from a startup to a scale-up. You have to gone through quite a lot of changes as well. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I don't think it's in the traditional change management, but as a startup, there's a lot of challenges, right? And I think we solve it by really focusing on the word alignment. As a business, we're completely aligned to the best interests of our clients. So our people, if they're aligned to that and they're focused on satisfying the needs of our clients, then that alignment is where we start from. But it's not just the clients; it's our partners. It could be companies like Saxo. We do value our partnerships across multiple channels. But the final thing is alignment with your employees, because you can talk about culture all you want, and you can talk about a lot of this fluffy stuff. But in the end, a lot of people want the basic stuff, and the report showed that. They want to learn and grow. They want a higher base pay. We need to pay more people, especially if they're executing. And as an organization that is a high-performing organization, we actually have a group of people that are very high-performing. Everybody is a high performer. What do you do in that scenario? It's a very challenging scenario. And everybody wants to be promoted. Everybody wants a higher bonus. Everybody wants a bigger base next year. And so managing that is really, really difficult. And it goes from that concept of alignment. And so I think what we've done is, things like distributed ownership. So we've actually engaged our employees from an early stage to actually help them own more of the company. So one way is to distribute employee stock ownership programs. But also we've allowed our employees from an early stage to buy into the company. So literally we hire people and we take their money. So that's a very effective way to grow a startup, by the way, just trade secret. So, giving them a bigger piece of the pie, bigger ownership, allows them to really be and act like owners. And it really helps to make the team a much more stable team with less turnover as well. So there's a lot of things that you can do, that you can approach from first principles. And like, everybody's different, every startup is different. So you have to think through what is it that you need? What is it going to work for your people? And how do we build the organization, the talent organization in the right way? So I think it's really about approaching things from first principles.
Tarinni, I do want to hear from you as well, because you have spoken to so many SMEs, MNCs, and you deal with change management all the time, especially from a talent perspective. So any suggestions there? Practical ones.
Yeah, I think when we were actually putting the report together and we were talking to various HR in FinTech, one of the questions we asked them is who drives or who owns the change management agenda in digital transformation. And we expected them to say HR, people and culture, but actually every single HR person we spoke to said it's driven by the entire organization and driven from the top. And I think we did have a debate with them around this, in terms of who should take that, final onus. And it was unanimous to say you need to build a buy-in from the top and then cascade it through the organization.
I like the question because I'm going to ask a leading question that probably my panel didn't expect this, and it's going to be a very cruel question. In your experience of all this change management, there will be natural attrition. There will be whiners. There are people who complain. There are people who don't want to change. What do you do in this kind of situation? And is a very high level of natural attrition in a push for change going to be something acceptable? And how do you balance that from an operational perspective? Oops.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it is a great question. And obviously, when you're changing the way an organisation works, some people win, some people lose. And if you're trying to distribute decision-making through the organisation a lot more, i.e. become more agile, as you do that, the people who control the decision-making power now don't have as much decision-making power, they don't have the right of veto that they may have had, or whatever it is. So you are going to have people who resist that, who think that their decision-making power is super important to the organisation, so that you maintain a certain standard, so that you maintain your brand in a certain way, so that you communicate in a certain way. All of these sorts of factors are there, which make some people feel that it's a good thing for them and other people feel that it's a bad thing for them. You are going to lose people who do not like that. You are going to lose people who do not want to work in that manner. You are going to lose people who think it disenfranchises them. That's just an unfortunate byproduct of changing the way the organisation wants to work, and it's regrettable, and you've got to sell it within the organisation that this is the way that the organisation is going to improve, whatever that transformation is.
Anyone?
No, go ahead.
So I think I see it rather differently. I think the nature of my organization is quite different from the rest and all that things. First and foremost, I don't think, or at least in my own limited memory, I don't think anyone has left because a significant change took place. I suspect that there could be a variety of reasons why the individuals would have left. And if I ask myself to look back, and this is a 13-year career, a very short career, a 13-year career in MAS, and myself, and I just realized even my ex-boss is actually in the audience right now. He just walked in. And it's a good segue for me to actually say this. So my ex-boss and I were in a group that does not exist anymore. We were all in a group that does not exist anymore because we learned just by creating that group. Imagine in public service, you create a group and then you disband it because you learn something. What did we learn? That group is not efficient being a centralized function. That group is better off being split into two. A developmental function, which we now have, and a pure analytical function that is now kind of bifurcated across divisions and all that things. But we had to learn it, and at the period of learning, let's face it, at the period where the decision was made where the group will be disbanded and all that things, there were disgruntled voices and all, but most of the dissatisfaction didn't come from, hey, moving to another team or whatever else. It came from losing the culture of that team that has been created. So sometimes it's these soft aspects that have to be broken, I would say. Not the hard aspects of, hey, I'm going to make less money or I'm going to have less power and all that things. I think people get used to that rather quickly. But losing that culture, using that lunch, even losing that lunch group, now those things have a way more significant impact in my view. And those were the things that I hear a lot of, when I was a younger officer, those were the things that we were even more concerned about. So this is actually a very personal experience, just based on my own experience going through change management. But if you ask me now, 5 years later, actually it was a correct decision. It made a lot of sense. And we learned to live, and everybody that was not happy have become almost partially happy, if not very happy.
Sam?
I think attrition is natural, especially in the startup space, and I think it really begins with how you bring that person on at the beginning. If you have set the right expectations of the role, and it's unfortunate, we love to take everybody with us, but these changes happen. Attrition is something that's part of life in startup world, and we don't have to be vindictive. They're not betraying us by leaving us. Maybe they go on, as I said earlier, they upskill and they come back, or there are changes that we have to accept. And I think that what we do is we try to, of course, empower people and give responsibilities, but also there's not a single person that's not replaceable, right? Including me, the founder, should be made replaceable. As the company grows and scales, we should improve the talent of the bench, so that we can actually continue to grow the business, grow the organization, and do more with who we have. So.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm mindful of time, so I just want to have one last question for my panelists, and it's rather different though. If you could pick an alternative career, what would that be? Nothing in finance. I don't want to call it nothing in the financial space. If you can pick an alternative career, what would that be?
So it's pretty easy for me to pick that. I'd be a historian.
Really?
Yes.
Historian?
Historian. It's something which, as I've got older, I've appreciated more and more. And it's something which I think you could learn so many lessons from. So, yeah, I'd be a historian.
Alvin?
I want to teach.
Serious? Teaching?
Yes.
Nice. Sam?
Teaching, but in a non-profit kind of social enterprise, which, excites me.
Tarinni?
I think for me it'd be interior design.
Oh. She has a beautiful house, by the way, just so you know. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm mindful of time. So before we end, I just want to say that there are a lot of significant key takeaway here, but I think there's one important point that really I take away with that's very strongly for me is that to all the founders and leaders here, give your teammates a safe space. I think this is one thing that has been called out many, many times. Give them a safe space where you can have open conversation. I think attrition is something that's going to be very common. People come, people go, but bear no grudges. And I think importantly, everyone has also highlighted that how important that right now, that focus on talent, the choosing the right people, how skill set and more like attitude and skill set over supersede experience. And these are some of the very important key takeaway. Now, if you need more information, we have the report download, so do download that. Last but not least, I do want to give a big shout out to those folks at the back, the team from Accenture. They have put in a lot of hard work to put this report together. So big round of applause for the team Accenture and my panelists, please. Thank you.